Hey everyone, Alex here from Japanese Masters, and today we are going to go over the second part of the first lesson of Minna No Nihongo. That is noun 1 wa, noun 2 dewa arimasen. Okay, let's go ahead and dive right on into this. Okay, as you see, our grammar structure for today is noun 1 wa, noun 2 dewa or ja arimasen. It's okay, so what does this translate to in English? Well, in English, this is noun 1 is not noun 2. So it's the exact opposite of the first part of this lesson, which was noun 1 wa, noun 2 des. So dewa arimasen or ja arimasen is the opposite of des. It's saying that noun 1 is not noun 2, not noun 1 is noun 2. And just like before, this can be noun 1 am not noun 2, if you want to say like I am not noun 2, or noun 1 are not noun 2, which would be like they are not noun 2, something like that. As I talked about in the last lesson, this is where noun 2 has to be a noun. If it was an adjective, then this might not work, this pattern. Certain adjectives, it will work, but other adjectives, e-adjectives in particular, this pattern will not work. Okay, let's go ahead and break this structure down. Okay, so noun 1 and noun 2 are exactly like they were in the first lesson. I'm not going to spend too much time going over this. Just quickly, noun 1 is going to be what's receiving it. Noun 2 is what's going to be giving the attribute. If you don't know what I'm talking about here, go ahead and check out the first video on the first part of this lesson for Minna No Nihongo. Wa is the same thing. It's still the topic marking particle, and it's the same as how I described it in the very first video. So yet again, check that out if you need to. Here's where we get to the new stuff. Dewa. Okay, so dewa is actually a combination of two particles. It's the combination of the particle de and the particle wa. So when you're reading this, make sure you read it as dewa, not deha. Like I said in the first lesson, if wa or the ha hiragana is a particle, then it's pronounced as wa. Dewa is a combination of two particles, which in itself is a particle, which means it needs to be pronounced as wa. This translates to something close to as for. De is kind of like a context particle, which sounds a little bit complicated right now, but just think of it as it's usually something like where a verb or something takes place. But yeah, when it's combined with wa, it kind of translates to as for. Then we come to arimasen. Arimasen comes from the verb aru, which means to exist. Now in Japanese, there are two different words for to exist. There is aru, which is used for inanimate or not living objects, and then iru, which is used for living or animate objects. There's a couple nuances in there, but I'm not going to go over that right now. Just think that for everything with this pattern, you're going to use arimasu. Okay, let's go ahead and translate this grammatical structure into what it literally translates to. So if you were to actually translate this, it would turn into something similar to in regards to noun 1, which is what the wa particle kind of translates to. So in regards to noun 1, and as for noun 2, it does not exist. Arimasen is just the negative polite form of aru. So I'll say it one more time. In regards to noun 1, and as for noun 2, it does not exist. I know it sounds a little bit complicated, but that's kind of how Japanese is laid out. There's not exactly these short one-word translations for these particles. You kind of gotta make these really complex sentences if you want to get a direct translation, a literal translation. Okay, now let's dive into what is that ja that you see. Well, ja is what is known as a contraction. In English, we have contractions. Do not changes to don't is an example of a contraction. But this contraction is slightly different. This contraction is a spoken contraction. So it's used when speaking to speak a little bit faster. An example in English that we shorten words to is like if you're going to use the phrase, I am going to. People in English rarely ever use the phrase, I am going to do something, blah, blah, blah. They usually shorten it. The shortest I've heard it is like, I'm gonna go do this, or something like that. I'm gonna do this. It's a colloquial way to shorten it so you don't have to say that long phrase every time. That is exactly what ja is. It shortens dewa to just ja, to just one syllable, one quick way to say it. So you'll actually see ja very, very often when people are speaking in Japanese. Written, dewa arimasen, you're gonna see a lot. But, however, in conversation, it is only used 1 in 1,000 times when speaking. That information I got from my sensei who wrote a textbook on vernacular Japanese. So yeah, only use 1 in 1,000 times. So if you can avoid using it while speaking, you'll sound a lot more colloquial, a little more natural. Okay, So let's go down to the list here at the bottom. Like I just said, dewa arimasen is written, and it is only used every 1 in 1,000 sentences. Ja arimasen. This is the spoken equivalent of dewa arimasen. It's a contraction, but it's still very polite. It's just, like I said, it's easier, it's faster to say. Now we move on to something quite interesting. Ja nai desu. This you're not going to find in Minna No Nihongo textbook. This one you're just going to have to trust me on. Okay, so like I said, how people don't use dewa arimasen when speaking in Japanese. They don't even really use ja arimasen. Why is that? Because it's way too long to speak when you're trying to speak fast in conversation. So the Japanese have actually kind of created this new grammatical structure called ja nai desu. Nai, by the way, is the plain form of aru in negative form. So instead of arimasen, that's the polite version. If you go one down, it's nai. That is the, I wouldn't say impolite, just plain version. So ja nai is fast, but it's not polite. So what people did is they added des onto the end of it to make it polite. The first thing you should know about this is not grammatically correct. If you go into a Japanese classroom and use this on your test, most likely you're going to get it marked wrong. However, it is used more or less exclusively in Japanese when speaking. Now, I'm not going to say it's used 100% of the time, but most people replace dewa arimasen or ja arimasen to ja nai desu. It's just more colloquial, faster to say. So if you hear that or you want to use that, it's basically almost polite. If you want to be safe, if you don't know where your ranking is, it's fine to use ja arimasen. It's fine to use dewa arimasen. It's fine to sound like a textbook when you're in the beginner stages. No one is going to not understand you. It's just if you want to sound a little more natural, ja nai desu is where you should go. And then finally, the last one on the list is just ja nai. This is the plain form of this grammatical structure. So you'd say noun 1 wa, noun 2 ja nai, or noun 1 wa, noun 2 ja nai desu. So yeah, so ja nai is when you're talking with friends or something. It's easy to say, it's quick, and it's used when you don't need to be polite. Okay, let's go ahead and go through a couple of sentences. Okay, I decided to take the same examples from the first video and go ahead and just make their opposites. So the first one is, he is not a teacher. Kare wa sensei de wa arimasen. So this is the full structure, full politeness. You might see this one written. So kare wa, so kare wa sensei de wa arimasen. Like remember before, if you need to pause on the particle. Don't pause on the word. Don't say kare wa sensei. Say kare wa sensei de wa arimasen. And let's go ahead and break this down. Noun 1 is, of course, is kare. Noun 2 is your sensei, and then you just kind of plug and play with the grammatical structure here. Dewa arimasen is what translates to the not up here. Is kind of wa, but it's also kind of a part of dewa. Yet again, it's still not something that totally translates to English, but yet again, you should be seeing this pattern is almost exactly like the first part of this first lesson, except now we're saying is not instead of is. Okay, next one. I am not a student. Watashi wa gakusei ja arimasen. Watashi wa gakusei ja arimasen. As you can see here, I used the contraction. I did not use dewa this time. This is something you'd probably use when you're speaking. Watashi wa gakusei ja arimasen. So yeah, so same thing as before. Watashi, I. This is the noun 1. Gakusei, student. That is your noun 2. And the ja arimasen is your am not. Okay, let's move on to the final sentence. This one is where I decided to use the phrase I was talking about, ja nai desu. So we have boku wa jon ja nai desu. There's a lot of J sounds there. That's a little bit hard to say. Boku wa jon ja nai desu. Boku wa jon ja nai desu. Okay, so boku wa jon ja nai desu. Jon, this is John in English. It's the as you can see up here in the hiragana, it's jo-n, jon. Is how they would say John in Japanese, because the actual phrase John is not a direct translation in Japanese. Some names will actually directly translate, but this is not one of those names. So, boku wa jon janai desu. Boku, of course, is the word for I that males typically use, and jon is the name John. And then, yet again, same phrase, but this time I replaced dewa arimasen with the janai desu. Like I said before, when you're speaking, you're going to hear this one a lot. When I first got to Japan, I heard this all the time. I had no idea what people were talking about. But trust me, you will hear this one all the time if you go to Japan. The only other thing I want to mention is that you might see boku here. Another thing, if you go to Japan, you're going to hear, especially if you're university level and everything like that, you're not going to even hear boku that often. You're not going to hear watashi that often, from males at least. You're going to hear ore. What is ore? Ore is like the least polite version of I. I don't want to say it's rude. It's more, my sensei always said it's intimate. What that means is you only use it with friends. Because if you go up to your sensei and say ore wa, you're going to sound very rough, rugged, and crude. So make sure not to use it with your senseis. Most of the time. However, with friends, all of my Japanese friends, as soon as we became friends, they stopped using boku, switched to ore. The same sensei I was talking about that taught vernacular Japanese, in his book, he talked about how Japanese males, there was a pie graph of which personal pronoun they use, and ore was like 95% of the time. Then the other time was boku, and then like less than 1% of the time was watashi. However, Japanese speakers who were not Japanese, theirs was like half watashi, half boku, and then 0% ore, because people are scared to use ore, because when the teachers teach it, they teach it as it's impolite. It's not impolite, it's intimate, which just means use it with friends. Don't use it with your principal or your teacher or something. So if you see ore or you want to use ore, go ahead and use it. Just make sure that you're talking to a friend. And it's actually a good way to bond with someone, because if you're talking to someone in Japanese and they hear ore, they'll be like, oh wow, he actually thinks of me as a friend. If you keep using watashi, you create this distance between you that's really hard to explain, but the other person will never think of you fully as a friend, because you are kind of distancing yourself by using watashi or even boku. Even the boku is a lot better than using watashi with a friend. At least this is males speaking. Okay, other than that, that is the end of today's lesson. I hope you found it useful. I hope you find dewa arimasen or ja arimasen or janai desu a little bit easier to understand now. If there's anything you think that I can improve, please put it in the comments below. If you have any questions, please put it in the comments below, and I'll be happy to answer them. Until the next lesson, keep studying, keep learning Japanese. All right, everyone. See ya.